Let's start today's session. Thank you everyone for joining the session. We would like to start this session by introducing Dr. Tanmay Jain. Dr. Tanmay is a polymer scientist who previously spent over 6 years at Center for Device and Radiological Health in US FDA department, where he served as a lead reviewer for medical device submissions and conducted research on polymer-based devices. His regulatory work encompassed device performance, chemical characterization, and biocompatibility assessments across a wide range of products, including orthopedic and neurological implants, urology and gynecology devices, cardiovascular and respiratory devices, surgical tools, and 3D printed technology. So it's a variety of devices he has reviewed for. At FDA CDRH, and Dr. Tanmay developed regulatory science tools and ASTM ISO standards to assess long-term biostability of polymeric devices. As a subject matter expert, he provided cross-cutting consults and advanced risk-based approaches to streamline performance and safety evaluations in regulatory pre-market submissions. Dr. Jain also co-founded Prof Protects, a startup that created opioid-detecting polymer mats, winning multiple awards and grants. The technology is now being licensed to a global conglomerate. He currently advises MedTech startups on regulatory strategy, materials evaluation, preclinical testing, and product development. And with that introduction, I will hand over this to Dr. Jain.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introduction as well. As Akash mentioned, my name is Tanmay Jain. Let's start by giving a brief introduction about myself. So I did my BTech from Institute of Chemical Technology in Mumbai. I did my PhD from the Department of Polymer Science at University of Akron. Mostly did a lot of synthesis, characterization of polymers, and a lot of rheology. I also co-founded a company called Prof Protects, and that was essentially for making color-changing mats for detecting opioids. That was for first responders. So essentially helping them detect fentanyl, carfentanil, stuff like that. So we've licensed that out now. And then since I graduated, I've been working at the FDA. So I also worked there while I was doing my PhD, but then after as well. So I was a staff scientist and lead reviewer in the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. So FDA generally has multiple centers. So Center of Devices and Radiological Health being one. Then there's the Center for Biologics, Tobacco, Drug, Veterinary Sciences, Food, multiple centers like that. So I was in the Center for Devices. That itself also has multiple offices under it. So one is the Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories. Then there is the Office of Health Technologies, 1 to 8. So 1 is like dental devices, 2 is cardiovascular, 3 is urology, gynecology, down like that. So I work with the Office of Health Technology 3, which is for gynecological and urology. And as a disclaimer, so all the opinions provided in this presentation are my own, and they don't represent the FDA's views of policy in any way. So this is India. Don't worry about it. I don't represent FDA anymore. I was there about like 1 month ago, but everything here that I'm presenting is mostly public information, so nothing proprietary. Right. So in terms of learning objectives, so of course, as you all know, FDA is the gateway to the US medical device market, and poor regulatory planning can essentially cause a lot of delays, cost overruns, or recalls. And I've personally come across many submissions where they've made almost, for lack of a better word, trivial mistakes of missing some test or checking the wrong box. And that just essentially adds to the timeline so much more. So here, my aim is not really to provide all the details for every process, because any slide here maybe could take another hour just to discuss in detail. But what I'm trying to get to is provide a more general, comprehensive, or a brief overview of different aspects of the regulatory process, as well as the 510(k) submission specifically. So here, I hope by the end of this presentation, what you would be able to take away is when you should be considering some regulatory requirements in a medical device. How do you define the intended use and the indications for use? Both are different terms. How do you classify your device and identify the marketing pathway? The submission process itself, the logistics of that, the registration and the listing fees, as well as how to develop a robust non-clinical testing plan, as well as the report, Utilizing Q submission for early feedback. I'll mention this several times throughout the submission, and it deserves being repeated, which is you should utilize the pre-submission and Q-submission pathway as much as possible, as early as possible, even if at this stage all you have is just a concept of a device. It doesn't hurt to like talk to FDA early on. And then I'll also mention some general pitfalls and considerations towards it. So to start with, this is a very general slide of a product development life cycle. But let me get a little bit show of hands is how many people are actually developing a device in this room? I can't see for the Zoom, but that's a good percentage, more than half of us. All right. So
all the cities are doing.
yeah, not a lot of consultants. So I should mention I'm not a consultant. Like Dr. Prerna mentioned, undergrad here, and that is primarily the reason I pursued a PhD, and the MBA journey also happened. So this is just hopefully my way of like being able to give back and say thanks. So I'm here just like to help, and I want to be able to learn more about the Indian ecosystem for medical devices. So that's what I hope to take away from here is just learn something new.
Top that can be kept down. Move it to top right. Yeah, close it okay. Yes.
All right. So I think you raised your hand. Would you say like where in this life cycle do you think you want to consider regulatory requirements?
Maybe at the preclinical tests.
At the preclinical testing. Anybody else want to venture a guess?
What was the question?
In this product life cycle, which is you have a product idea, then a product planning, market stages, then the actual prototype design development, then perhaps from there you're actually doing preclinical testing in a GLP labs and stuff like that. Then you're going for an FDA clearance, and then there's also the post-marketing compliance requirements, right? So where do you think generally in this cycle you want a regulatory person to get involved, or you should be having some regulatory considerations?
So let's start second.
Idea.
Yeah. All right, that's perfect. So essentially, throughout this life cycle, you want to be, especially when you're developing a medical device, you want to be cognizant of the regulatory requirements. It's going to come in very, very handy, and it will save you a lot of time and cost down the line, just as if you know what your regulatory requirements are while you're developing the product itself. So at the very early stage, when you just have an idea, right? You want to be able to define the product, first understand whether it's a medical device, what is its intended use, the targeted population, indications for use, the device classification pathways, testing strategy, what are the risks, like design input, output, stuff like that. In the prototype development stage, maybe you're more further along in the QMS cycle. So now you're looking at more like risk analysis, the design controls that are there. Maybe you're initiating some tests like quality control tests, developing test protocols. This is where you could probably be preparing a submission or having a pre-submission interaction with FDA, showing them your test protocols, getting a feedback on it, whether these test protocols actually address the claims that you're trying to make. Also, like other kind of regulatory, but separate from the submission, applying small business determination, like that can save you so much money down the line, but that itself takes 60 days. So while you're looking into this regulatory cycle, maybe you want to consider when do you apply for small business determination, as well as there is something called unique device identifiers, like a barcode that goes on it. So you need to apply for that also. You need to plan for that early on so that you're not doing it right towards the end. And here, like I mentioned, like you could have CROs doing testing for you, but the onus is on actually the device manufacturer to be doing your own quality check reports. Unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of you already in this room know now that there have been a lot of reports from FDA that there's a lot of data integrity issue happening. Like people are manipulating data reports, especially for safety, biocompatibility, even performance reports that will come out in the next few months. But there's been a lot of issues with data, and that's the onus of the manufacturer and not the test lab. So like it's your file that's going to get rejected, nobody else. So it's for you to make sure that any test reports that you get are quality checked before you actually submit to it. And then there's the clearance approval stage, of course, which can take anywhere between, like, depending on what kind of submission pathway it is, can take from like few months to like several years if it's a high risk device. but then that's where your regulatory considerations don't really end. You still have the post-compliance things to look at. So like the first thing you're most likely going to do is to do registration and listing, which is as soon as your device is cleared, you want to register your company in the US, that this is my company and this is where I'm located and this is my US agent and my correspondent person. And you're also going to list the device, that these are the devices I'm selling. There's a fees and a process to that also, that after the clearance, right? Then the unique device identification, the barcode, then you're going to get the barcode after the clearance, that this is the barcode for your device that goes on the labeling. That comes after this. Same for the QMS requirements, there's post-market surveillance, and there's also like life cycle file updates. So there might be small changes to your file. Not everything needs to be reported to FDA, but it is a requirement from QMS perspective that you maintain it on file. So there will be a lot of post-compliance requirements too.
You can go to GUDID.
Yeah, so that's the global unique device identification program. So like there's 3 accredited bodies, you need to apply to them, and they will create ID number for you. So like it'll be like your company code and then the device code. So like it's essentially a very long 20 digits of thing.
So, this will be available on this YouTube also.
YouTube
Yeah,
videos are
access.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So coming to this presentation itself or the talk itself, what I wanted to cover is like some FDA background and basics. So just like device classification, marketing pathways, and then focus on the 510K pre-market notification. So there have been some changes to the 510K process lately. There's a new submission form called the E-Star form, and I'll pull that up. But that's something that you need to be really familiar with as you're developing the device and not just filing for it. Okay. And then some terms like substantial equivalence or predicate selection, like that essentially determines your entire regulatory strategy. You need to be aware of how these terms are defined and used, and then the fees and the timelines, of course. In terms of the non-clinical testing considerations, there's a lot of pre-testing considerations that you think about. It's, in my opinion, it's not best practice to start testing right away. Better to like actually have a test protocol and have a discussion with FDA that this is my test protocol, this is what I intend to do, would this be accepted? That would save you so much time and grief down the line, because there would be no like interaction back and forth. And most of the times the feedback we give are binding. Unless like the science or something like changes a lot. Even if we gave you feedback 5 years ago and you said that this was acceptable, that this is how you should do it, we will, abide by that when you come in with your file. So as early you can contact FDA. Like I've had people who just had the concept of a device and still discussing like, how they want to go through it. So there's no early stage for QSA. Yes.
Are you taking questions intermittently or
If there's a short one, we can, but otherwise we can.
how many such pre-meetings can you have with the FDA for a given?
I don't think there's a limit, but so in the pre-sub itself, there's only like 4 or 5 major questions you can have. It can have sub questions, but it's not essentially like a pre-review my submission for free thing, right? It's asking very specific questions that, hey, my test protocol is this, what do you think? And that time we're not going to review your data. Like, officially, we're not going to review your data, but some reviewers, like if the data is there, if I see something that is going to be a bothersome, like your test sample size or something like that, I might still let you know as additional consideration that apart from the questions you've asked, this is what I noticed in your file. And maybe you want to address this later on. So yeah. So the trick there is really to how you phrase your questions.
And there's a waiting period for your so it takes some time. So I think they should factor that.
Yeah, I think so. It's supposed to be 60 to 75 days to get the feedback, but recently, because we've had some changes to our staffing or to FDA staffing, there have been some delays and like some delays like that. So maybe you might want to consider that.
Yeah.
And pre-subs generally are like the lowest, in our priority considerations. So like if it's an IDE or a PMA or like a humanitarian device exemption, something like that. Of course, like that goes to the top of the pile and like gets reviewed as soon as we can. Right? But if it's a pre-sub, it's not really a submission. So no patient is actually really waiting for that device. So in that case, it could take longer. But which is why like there's no early time to reach out. Like if you're thinking about a device right now, just file up. It's free to file. So yeah, so I'll then discuss some the non-clinical testing consideration, the pre-testing stuff, as well as the non-clinical tests themselves, and then just some general pointers about what I've seen in test reports before. So now about the FDA itself, so FDA's authority to regulate devices comes from the 1938 Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetics Act. This was amended in like 1976 for to introduce medical devices called the Medical Device Amendments. And to fulfill the provisions of this act, FDA develops, publishes, and implements regulations within Title 21 CFR, which is Code for Federal Regulations, Parts 800 to 1299. And this generally includes general controls and special controls. Now, the reason I bring this up is it's very important that you actually know the regulation. Because when you look at the regulation, it will tell you a lot about your device, the risk types, as well as like maybe even like guidance documents that are relevant to you, or maybe you recognize standards that are relevant to you, or any special controls. So you want to be intimately familiar with your regulation for your device class. And there's also a MADUFA amendment, which is Medical Device User Fee Amendment. This was introduced in 2002, and it renews every 5 years. But this is the act essentially which allows us to charge you a fee, or I shouldn't, it allows FDA to charge you a fee. And in return, it promises that it will give you a response within 90 days or like 50 days for a email or something like that. Right? So they are also bound that timeline. The timeline is not taken very lightly. So there are some basic regulatory requirements that manufacturers of all medical devices distributed in US must comply with. So I already mentioned the establishment registration and the medical device listing. So that's CFR Part 807. For the device pathways itself, like the 510K, the pre-market approval, which is for class 3 devices, or IDE, which is for like unapproved devices, those are like the specific parts mentioned here, the 807, 814, and 812. Then there's also the CFR for the quality system regulation. And this is one of the major ones where you'll see a letter from FDA, because that's not something we see in mission quality system requirements, but that's something you're supposed to maintain because it's part of regulation. And same goes for labeling and medical device reporting, which comes after approval. So you might be already familiar with this, but I'll just go through this quickly, which is the way devices are classified is based on the risk of the device. So there's the 3 classes, class 1, class 2, and class 3, and the auxiliary, which is like the unclassified devices. Class 1 is low risk devices. They're usually 510K exempt, so usually don't require a submission, but they're like, something like I think these are not, these are exceptions. Examination gloves for like surgical use or mechanical wheelchair are exemptions for class 1. But these are mostly like band-aids or something like that, a very low risk device. But even in these cases, you still have general controls. The ones I mentioned in the previous slide, that still apply. So you still have to maintain the quality systems and regulations.
What are general controls?
Yeah, so general controls are essentially like the what I had here before. These are the general controls, like the quality system regulation, the labeling requirements. So like on your labeling, it should be clear what your device is, right? It shouldn't be adulterated, your product, so stuff like that. So these are like general, like basic GMP requirements. Those are general controls and they apply throughout all devices. But for class 2, which is low to moderate risk devices, there will also be like special controls. Now, this depends on the device entirely, right? For some devices, there might be a requirement for like post-market compliance, like follow-up study by 22G, or there might be something for like, for some reason you need a tensile test for this thing, very specific also. So special controls, again, it's defined in the regulation for your device. And because it's in the regulation, those must be followed. So if there's a special control, you must be addressing that for sure. Then there's class 3 devices, which is high risk devices. So these require the general controls, of course, still apply. But then again, there is like specific controls for the device itself, which will be the PMA controls for it. And unclassified is like if it's a first of its kind or de novo submission. or pre-amendment, which is something that was introduced into the market before 1976, before the regulations came into place, then that could be an unclassified device. So the thing to remember here is like the CFR is binding. Then there's the next level, which is FDA guidance documents. Those are essentially FDA's recommendations. Those are also like kind of the special controls. They'll be defined as special controls. Those are what FDA is recommending that's what you follow. We generally expect that's what you're going to follow. And if you don't, like, you've got to explain why not. But those are the recommendations. And then there is the ASTM standards or the ISO standards, which is more like a suggestion that there is a standard method of doing things. Do it this way. If you're not doing it that way, then explain to us why you had to do it some other way. But that's not binding. So we'll do a little bit pop quiz quickly, which is the first thing you need to know about a device is whether is it a medical device, right? I have two examples on this screen. There's the adult diapers on the left and the infant diapers on the right. So please shout it out, like which one do you think is a medical device? Out of the two.
Adult diapers.
Adult diapers. Why?
Because it is for fecal incontinence, which is like a medical condition. And it helps with that.
Yes, perfect. Exactly. So it's essentially addressing a disease state, right? So here it depends entirely whether it's a medical device or not on how you define your intended use and your indications of use. That's how I will know if it's a medical device or not, like a reviewer will know, right? So in this case, intended use is the same, which is it's to protect garments from soiling. But the indications for use will clarify the target population or the disease state that you're addressing or the healthcare setting that it's being addressed in, maybe even the duration of use, depending on what the device is. So here, because on the left, it's addressing the fecal or urinary incontinence. That's why adult diapers qualify as a medical device, whereas the infant diapers do not. So a key takeaway again is how you define your intended use and your indications of use will be the bedrock of all your regulatory strategy going forward.
Yes, a quick question on that. So if they define the medical condition here is the fecal incontinence, right? Which is, but let's say somebody removes that term fecal incontinence and they define it as general, then will it not be medical device? Because then both IFUs will be same.
Yeah, I mean, again, like if it's in a home setting, if your indication of use doesn't say it's for urinary or fecal incontinence, then yeah, most likely it may not. But again, like there is the indications of use, but there's also the device design. If your device design is obvious that it's meant for a medical treatment or condition, but you're somehow, you want to change the language and say that it's not, but still like we can see it and tell that no, it's actually meant for treating or addressing or mitigating a medical condition. In that case, you might still push back.
How do you think about Fitbit?
In vitro diagnostics.
But some of it is not a medical device, right?
It's still collecting data to support taking decisions. So like if that data is being used by a clinician for making some kind of determination, then it's in vitro diagnostic device. But I think if it's being used by the person, so I have no experience with in vitro diagnostics, but my guess is based on this is if it's being used only by the person itself, then it's a person used device. It's not a medical device. Okay. So unless you're making a medical decision based on that data, then it's in vitro diagnostics. Okay. So there are, of course, several types of FDA submissions. The first four here, which is the pre-market notification 510K, they are also like traditional, special, abbreviated. There's three different kinds. Traditional is when you're a new submitter, a new device. Special is if you already have a 510K and you're making a change to yours. You're making a small change in my sterilization process, let's say. Then you submit a 510K, a special 510K. You don't have to do all the other things. Just be like, this is the only change that's happened. And abbreviated is used when, let's say, if there's already some guidance or like some special controls for that particular device, that you could just show conformity to that guidance, and that essentially determines safety and efficacy. Then you don't need the traditional 510K again. But that's again rare. So the 510K is a marketing pathway. The way market approval is a pre-marketing pathway. That's how you're getting to the market. The de novo, the humanitarian device exemption, That's a pre-marketing pathway, right? IDE is more or like if I go emergency use authorization that was used for COVID and all. Those are not a marketing pathway itself. Those are for like more unapproved or like some initial devices that are being approved case by case basis, right?
You said de novo is a marketing approach.
Yes, because that's how you're going to the market with it. We are the first of the kind, right? And then there's 513 G request for information queue submissions. These are essentially ways to get feedback from FDA. There's other programs, which is like a STEP program, device breakthrough program. So get the other ones now. But there's several programs which essentially are accelerators. Like if a device has certain like rare disease or some orphan drug thing, like a rare condition is being treated or like it's immediately needed, like very specific criteria, then there's this accelerator program that will help you get to the market quicker. The first thing, let's say now that you know you have a medical device, how do you determine which is the marketing pathway that you're going to follow, right? What is the regulatory process that you need to follow? So the first thing I recommend, or you should be doing, is really check FDA databases, particularly the product classification database. And on the left, that's what you see. That's what it will look like. Is you'll have this advanced search boxes below, where you can search by either the product code, the device name, submission type, different categories. But generally, if you just like type in, I did like infusion pump, what I get from that is like 22 results, which are all infusion pumps in one way or the other. And they all have a unique product code for them. Product code is essentially the 3-letter word you see on the left there. And then it also gives you the regulation number on the right and the device classification. So now, how do you know which of these is really relevant to your device? That goes back to the intended use and indications of use. Based on all these lists here, whatever is closest to your device and this intended use, that's most likely going to be its product code. So when you pick up in that, the infusion pump, this is the page it takes you to, and this is where it will give you all the details about what is the submission type you need, what is the regulation, the device class, whether it's an implanted device or not. It will also tell you the recognized consensus standards. So these are generally useful for you to understand like what is the testing that's going to be required for your device, as well as the guidance documents. If there is a guidance document, like you want to be very, very familiar with that for your device, because that essentially is a product roadmap of what is needed for that particular device, right? And also the regulation number. Like you always want to make sure you check the regulation number, because in case there's some special controls or something like that that's applicable to your device, you're going to find that in the regulation number. So this is the guidance document for the infusion pump, right? This is what it will look like. It will have the name on the top and the date it was issued on. But essentially, this will be the entire roadmap for what an infusion pump generally would require in terms of testing and submission and all the details that go with it.
Clarification you have can ask. Longer questions later. Okay.
If there is no product classification as for the device, it's a completely new product. So this wouldn't be the pathway at all, because then you would go to de novo.
Yeah.
De novo would be the
Yeah. I mean, the first thing, of course, is your homework due diligence. You want to make sure that there's no other similar devices on the market. Maybe there is something similar that you could rely on. But yeah, if it turns out that there's nothing, then yeah, I think you probably have to, so de novo. Then,
But de novo will be much longer and much
Yeah, because then you have to do like risk analysis and all to determine what is the testing you need, what is its purpose, like the clinical use conditions, all
There
that.
would be a classification within class 1 to 3, categorization.
It's outside that.
So it will be in the unclassified position.
Yeah. So it's unclassified, it's a de novo. So depending on like what the device is, then it would go into class 2 or class 3 after it's approved. Like my first time when I come into the market, I'll go as de novo, and then FDA will create a regulation in that 21 CFR. Will actually write up the regulation that this is the new product code, this is what it requires, this is what it needs. The regulation will be introduced. So the next time somebody comes with a device like you, they will find it on this database.
couple of points. One is, I think 70% of approvals are 510Ks, right?
Yes.
Most of them are 510Ks, right?
Yeah.
You don't get any brownie points by claiming that you're.
Yeah.
I agree.
Like, it's want to say they're absolutely new. First thing.
Rather, I would think it is tougher to get de novo than a 510K.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because it's completely new, like, then you have to justify how you are addressing safety and ethics.
Point is fine that you are this.
So actually, it's a very tricky tightrope dance between like PTO and US FDA. Because for patent office, you want to say it's mine, is but for FDA, you don't want to be this thing that it's novel and no one's done. So it's very important that you are very careful with the language that you use every time for device description, intended use, and indication.
Fortunately, the criteria is slightly different. Like I said, it's intended use here and indications, there is something different. So you can manage that. You have to have your common sense.
It's uncommon to common people. According to my German problem.
Yeah, so for the pre-market notification itself, this is 510K generally for low or moderate risk devices. The key term for this kind of process is that there's already a device on the market that is substantially equivalent to yours. So the key term is substantial equivalence. And the device has to be a legally marketed predicate device. You'd be surprised how many times people come up with like some device that they saw in a paper or something else like that, which is not legally marketed, that they want to use as a predicate. That doesn't count. It has to actually be cleared by FDA before, and it's being legally marketed, only then that's a predicate device. And for establishing substantial equivalence, there's two things that you're really looking for. One is the intended use, and the other is the technological characteristics. Now, FDA in the guidance document has a very nice flow chart, which I have reproduced here on the right. So here you'll see we start with identifying the new device, and the predicate device. On the left, these are the CFR sections, the codes that are valid for each question here, as well as in the guidance document where it's discussed more. And now there's 6 questions, right? So the first one is like, is the predicate device legally marketed? If it's a no, then it's a non-substantial equivalent. So you're already out of the loop. If it's yes, then you go ahead. Then the devices have the same intended use, right? They have to have the exact same intended use, anatomical site, target population, all that stuff. Then from there, do the devices have the same technological characteristics or not? Now, it's not necessary that they have, exactly the same. So here you'll see if it's same, then yeah, you're both essentially almost identical, then it's fine. It's substantially equivalent. But if no, then does the difference in technological characteristic raise a new question of safety and efficacy? Now, the key term here is new question of safety and efficacy, right? So let's say you're looking at the stainless steel and titanium screw, right? The question of safety that's going to raise an efficacy that's going to come from this is essentially whether the implant will be rejected or not, right? Whether it's going to cause some like immune reaction or something like that, right? But that risk is the same. The type of risk is the same. But now if you were incorporating, let's say, like an electrical source into that device, now there's a new risk that you have raised, which is like there could be thermal damage or electromagnetic interference from other devices, stuff like that. So in the technological characteristics, does it raise a different question of safety and effectiveness? So that's very key to understand that part. So you can still be different in your technology. You don't have to be same to the previous device. And then let's say if you do have different technological characteristics, are there actually like well-established scientific methods that could be used to assess whether that differences lead to like more questions of safety or efficacy or not? If there is something like a device which is treating pain, let's say, right? There's no really a clinical or a bench test method that would measure pain, right? So there's no established good method I have that I can rely on and say that, even if I could show some preclinical testing to measure pain, then it probably goes to a clinical trial or something like that. So then the methods have to be acceptable. And if yes, then the actual performance testing, does that demonstrate substantial equivalence or not? So that's the last question.
The question on legally marketed devices, currently on the market, or if let's say a predicate is selected,
Yeah.
it was on the market after 1976.
Yeah.
But then somehow that predicate device company stopped it. Can that be used as a predicate?
Yeah.
It can.
Like we don't know, or we don't care as much like how much devices they're selling, right? Unless like there's actually reports that cause some safety efficacy issues.
So
Like
now-
polypropylene surgical mesh being a famous example for that. Like they were cleared by 510K before, but then turns out like there were so many like health complications that came up. So now it got reclassified into class 3. So it's not.
So the predicate should not have a recall also. Is that
Yeah, and if it has a recall, let's say if it has a recall for sterilization, right? Then maybe in your report you're giving more details about the sterilization process or like doing the verification validation for sterilization. So it could be a recall, but let's say if the recall is because the device was not effective, or it causes like polypropylene surgical mesh again, right? In that case, yeah, because that's the device itself is not doing what it's intended to do and it's causing hurt. So like, and that's why it was recalled. So then yeah, you can't rely on that as the predicate. So
Let me maybe a couple of examples here.
Yeah.
Suppose you're doing some kind of a screw, change the dimensions, so on. So that would be not probably may not be effective
Yeah.
for safety and efficacy.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes, yeah.
Dimensions.
Because-
If I change the material, right? If I say go from cobalt to titanium,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You'll have to prove that that change did not make a difference, right?
Yeah, but it depends on like how you're going to show that, right? Like if it can be shown by testing, let's say it's like a nickel thing, then it can be shown, and nickel is not a great example, but if it can be shown by wear testing, that the risk is not there, or like the risk is being mitigated, even though the material is same, then there's no need additional risk essentially being introduced by that change. Because like when you're changing material, like that's hard to determine at what point of change does a new 510K trigger, right? So it's essentially back to like risk assessment of does it raise a new question of safety and ethics? Is it a new type of risk that we have never addressed in a predicate device?
Suppose I have a material which is say used in say 100 micron size, and then go down to say 100 nanometer size. What happens?
So again, like if your performance testing and your biocompatibility testing can address that the risk is the same, right? But let's say surgical mesh. Right? Now the earlier mesh was let's say 1 millimeter thick filaments. Now you've gone to 100 micron. Now there is additional risk, which is that the mechanical force may not be enough. But if you do mechanical testing and show that it's equivalent to the before one, then the risk is addressed because it's not likely to mechanically rupture because you're shown with established testing methods. And this can be addressed by preclinical testing only.
These questions of what test can be asked in a case of for the
PISA is the perfect place to ask for that. Yeah, these questions.
but in that case, in the mesh example, when you go to that 100 micron size filament, the NSE letter would be issued even before they won't give you chance to submit the testing reports, right? The NSE letter would say that no, this is now raising different questions, so it's not substantially equal.
Yeah, but the thing is like this will be considered when your entire package is coming, which will include testing. So I'll show the stages of how we review it, but there's initially a technical screening review in the first 15 days. There, all I'm looking for is whether all your testing reports that are needed are there and are they legible or not. A lot of times we see reports in different languages also. So I want to make sure that all the reports are actually in English, I can read them, and as well as they're complete. I'm not looking for whether they are acceptable or not in the first 15 days, but just that they're there or not.
But so they do give, my idea was they don't give you chance to submit the test reports. If they say that no, it is raising different questions, so you have an NSE letter. That's not
You
true.
can submit, like you're going to pay for it. So submit as many times as you want, like they're getting money out of it, right? So they don't have any problem with that. But when you're submitting, the only way I'll even come to this stage of reviewing whether it's substantially equivalent or not is first whether your package is complete or not. do you have all the testing that's recommended for that device, particularly or not? If it doesn't have that, we don't even reach the stage of, looking at substantial equivalence. And mesh is a bad idea for like 510K, of course, because it's not a class 2 device anymore, it's a class 3 device. But yeah.
I have a question. So basically, if I have a number of predicates available in the market, which uses a single specific sample type, let's say bodily fluids, and if I have developed a device that uses dual sample matrices, so how does substantial equivalence comes into picture?
Yeah, so I'm literally getting to that on the next slide. So I'll go to that. If you still have that question, please let it know. All right, so another quick focus. So this is, let's say, a device. It has the outside of a green apple. Inside, it's an orange, right? So my intended uses, it's a fruit for providing nutrition. Indications of uses that, it provides the orange, vitamin C and all this for people looking for nutrition in the packaging or the peel nature of an apple, right? Technological characteristics, I have the outside coating, packaging itself, then I have the orange pulp inside. These are my technological characteristics. So now, just shout it out, please. Like, what do you think would be a predicate for this? Would a green apple be a good predicate, or an orange be a good predicate, or both?
Or the plain orange.
Yes.
So,
Actually, you can have both. That was a trick question. I'm sorry, but you can have more than one predicate, right? You still have a primary predicate, which is essentially most of your substantial equivalence will be derived on that. You can't have a Frankenstein of a device which like has 10 different predicates and try to match each one here and there. It's unlikely to go through. But there's generally, it's very common to see, 2 predicates per device, right? So here, this is how you present a substantial equivalence determination, which is my intended use. My subject device is a fruit. The primary predicate device, intended use is same. And secondary predicate, it's same also. Now, labeling is same between the subject and the predicate device. The weight is same. The dimensions are equivalent, right? Or the design of my product is equivalent between the two, or more with the primary predicate than with the secondary predicate, let's say. And now the features, the technological characteristics itself, my primary predicate has the same technological characteristics of the green skin, whereas my secondary predicate has the same technological characteristic as the pulp inside, the second feature. So essentially, I can use 2 different predicates, but still there will be a primary one that is most likely going to have the same intended use and also most likely the same indication of use. So generally, when you're going through this process, if you find a predicate device, more or less you want to copy paste the indications of use. You don't want even one word change here or there because who knows what that's going to lead to. You can have it change, of course, like if you do it well, but depending on how you do it. But most times you'll see literally like it's the same indications of use that's being used again.
we didn't put indications of use in this table.
Yeah, I forgot.
It should be there.
Yeah, it could be like intended use covers indications of use. So intended use is the big umbrella. Indications of use is the more the specificity of.
Yeah, because the internals, which is the orange pulp,
Yeah.
which is the nutrition component of it,
Yeah.
that could be there in that one and this one, but not the middle one.
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
So in which case, so you use a combination of predicate for this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is why, like the features, that's the technological characteristic. Intended use, like I said, for substantial equivalence, 2 things. Intended use has to be same. Technological characteristics could be different as long as they don't raise a different question of safety and effectiveness.
Yeah.
So here, like technological characteristics are different, but that's why I'm using another secondary predicate to show that there is some other device which has the same, characteristics and it is unaffected before.
There's one more aspect here that you've chosen feature A and feature B as this.
Yeah.
But somebody can choose a feature C additionally. Right? Now, does the examiner insist on a feature C being there? Like somebody might just leave out feature C, right?
Yeah, but that depends on your primary predicate. Let's say your primary predicate is, let's say, cystoscope, which is used for imaging,
Yeah.
right? now you tell me everything is same, but except the imaging part, you've left that out as a technology characteristic. But like, yeah, I'm going to see the predicate device and know that that's the main, one of the main technology characteristics it has. So, and if you don't have that, and you're claiming to be a cystoscope, then that's not going to fly.
Okay.
Right? But you could have less characteristics. So let's say a cystoscope again, you might have one that connects the Wi-Fi and the signal to some other clinician somewhere else. Whereas you could have a new one, which is wire connected to a monitor. Okay. So now it's less feature of having, I don't have wireless anymore, but that's essentially not raising a new question of safety. So that's why I can still use.
I have a question.
Yes.
So let us assume I have a primary predicate device and my device is similar to that kind. And what if I doesn't have a secondary predicate device? Instead, I have an additional add-on, something like some new feature or something like that. So will that be classified under de novo or will have a
Depends,
separate actual equivalence determination for that?
The intended use is same. Primary mode of action in use is same. Then if the technological characteristic, if you can show if there's a performance test, an acceptable performance test that can be used for it, then most likely you might still be able to, go with the 510K route. But if there is no test for that feature or characteristic that you've introduced now that has never been seen before, it's an entirely new thing, and it will affect the safety and effectiveness of this device, then yeah, it's going to be a de novo. So there's other than the predicate device, there's also like a reference device. Reference device is not used for substantial equivalence, but it's used for essentially, let's say there's a bench testing method that I'm borrowing from this particular device. So glucose monitors, the strips, right? Like you're testing on the finger, but your predicate is also another glucose monitor like that. But maybe the test that you're doing to show that it works accurately is the comparing to the lab-based method. So the lab-based method is essentially my reference device because I'm essentially using established bench testing to show my performance.
You could even possibly do one more thing, where he has a version 1 and a version 2. Version 1 you do 510K, version 2 you do First get your product in.
Yeah.
Without the extra claims that you're making, and then version 2 you do all the hard heavy work. By then hopefully somebody will fund you, so you can version 2.
Which is actually another thing, like we discussed earlier.
We are actually working on it, so it came.
Okay. So again, regulatory strategy is different than your commercial strategy, right? You don't have to make all the claims. As long as they're not affecting safety and effectiveness, you don't have to have that claim that, I have this new feature, right? I mean, of course, that's not supposed to be directly related to the intended.
That wouldn't be an obstacle for the.
It's just you'll have to show that how you're going to show, equivalent performance and safety for that new feature. And if there's no other device like that, it's going to be a tough time to show that, right? But you could just not mention that I have this new feature, because as long as it's not affecting the safety and effectiveness, it's just a nice thing to have. It doesn't need to be in the regulatory side of things. So a little bit the logistics itself. So the 510K submission process, as I mentioned, there's a new E-star template. I was going to open that, but I think for benefit of time, I'll do it later. But it's an interactive PDF. I would highly recommend that you just Google it. What is a E-star? Download the form. There is separate ones for in vitro diagnostic device and a non-in vitro diagnostic device, and it's a very interactive PDF. Any answer you give, it will populate the rest of things. So biocompatibility, let's say, is a very common question. Do I do biocompatibility testing? What all kind of biocompatibility testing can I do? In the form, if you just fill out the questions of how many tissue contacting components you have, what is the tissue contacting type, the duration of it, it will populate itself that these are the tests that need to be done. And in the test also, it will give you specific information that needs to be filled out. So even before you actually are through the submission process, not a bad idea to actually have this template and just to play around to see what it recommends as testing. And it also has nice help menus, which explain the CFR regulation, where it's coming from, as well as what it means when it's asking a question like, is it a life-sustaining device? What does that mean? It'll have a health section right next to it. So it's a really nice format, that probably want to get used to. And this is also the format you're going to use for 3-subs and 2-subs. So if you're going to ask FDA questions, most likely this is the form you're using. Might as well get familiar with it now. Now coming to the timeline and team roles, which is where your question was before. So as soon as you submit a file, generally the first check is like more administrative from the policy team, which is they look at the user fee. Have you paid the user fee or not? And then is it a valid e-star submission? Like earlier it used to be like an e-copy submission and all that. Before that it was like on pen drives and like, physical forms and all this. So now they just check, is it the valid e-star form that you've used or not? As long as that's there, they're going to send you an acknowledgement letter. It's most likely going to come within first 7 days that we have received your file. Then that's when it actually comes to me, which is a reviewer, right? And that's when like the kind of the review starts. So first thing we look for is the technical screening, which is the file complete? Does it have all the things in English? Does it have all the standard guidances that are required? Have you included that? So that's the sanity check in the first 15 days. Now here itself, like you'll see in eStar, something like having a USB connection to your device essentially raises questions for cybersecurity. And I've seen people like, just miss out putting that tick mark, even though they had a USB console. But now they didn't do that, so they didn't understand there was cybersecurity requirements. So now when I looked at it, like, yeah, it's not complete because you actually missed an entire section of testing. So now it's put on TS hold, which is you have 180 days or something to submit the full file again. Or if it's complete, then you will get what is the TS OK letter, which is technical screening was okay. You have submitted all the files. Now the actual substantial review of the portion starts. So this is generally like 45 to 75 days. In the first 10 days, right, I'm going to look at substantial equivalence, the predicates, whether they're all okay or not. And then I'm going to look at what level of risk I involve, which is, let's say if it's a device that contains cybersecurity elements, it's most likely I'm going to need a consultant. So like I've done a lot of consults myself. So you'll need somebody expertise in that particular area to come in because it's pretty heavy on that part. Like something like reprocessing, a device is being reused again and again. Now the doctors or like the end consumer has to do the sterilization. So those have to be like really well defined. So it goes to a tier 2 reviewer. Same for like biocompatibility. There's animal studies that are required, something like that. And it'll go to a tier 2 review. So in the first 10 days, I'm just making sure that your substantial equivalence argument and your labeling is a major thing that keeps coming up again and again. There's a guidance, there's a standard for it. That says exactly what symbols should be there. Even the eStar, when you select if it's a single-use device, it will pop up a dialog box saying that make sure there's a symbol with like 2 and a cross across it, which is that it's a single-use device. So labeling is generally like one of the first few things that we see, and then there's always some issue with that or not. But then in the first 10-15 days, that's when I get my consultants on board. I've assigned consults that this is your part, please. Like, can you look at the optical performance test, the thermal safety, which are like very unique to a particular device, and then they'll provide consults. And then the rest of it, generally, if it's like depending on the risk again, which is called the lead reviewer himself will review the entire thing. And this is when in the substantial review, they'll reach out to you, which is called the interactive review. So you'll directly get an email. There'll be a correspondent that you have assigned to file, which you must, and then get an email that in your submission, you provided this, but this was missing. This is why we need it, and please provide this. So even the language we ask in is a particular language called 4-part harmony. We define what you have given, what you have not given, why it's needed, and what we want. Right. So in the interactive review and all, you'll get questions directly from them, asking, some questions, follow-up questions, and all that. So if you're getting interactive review, that's great. Because the only time I think there's no interactive review is when the file is so bad, I know it's going to go on hold, So what is the point of like doing back and forth? Might as well just put it all together and let it go on hold, and you can address it all together. But I'll also say, like, we don't want to put a file on hold. And multiple reasons, of course, like Madhupa wants us to be able to clear as many. But at the same time, from a reviewer perspective, when a file comes in, it's assigned to me. I put it on hold. Now you have 180 days to come back. The thing is, most likely you're going to come back when it's Christmas or when it's like some holiday, because you want to give it to me and then you leave. But then my clock starts, right? So thing with holds is they all tend to come back at the same time. I might have 10 files today in my file queue, but when these holds start coming in, it can go like 20, 30 at the same time. And always happens during holiday season. So I don't want to put it on hold. So I'm going to ask you as much as I can in the interactive review. Can provide me all the information in the interactive review. That's great. Like, that's what we want to see. But yeah, if you cannot, for some reason, generally, and we'll ask questions that can be addressed. If there is question that we know requires retesting, we won't ask it in interactive. So it's going to take you longer than that. You won't be able to reply in like a week, and it's losing me time. So I won't ask you like those questions. But if there's any question that requires like retesting that I know requires retesting, I'm going to put it on hold most likely. And then you have 180 days to respond after that. So generally, if you have responded by then by day 90, that's when you'll get the decision letter likely. So as I mentioned, like there's the opportunity to interact as pre-submission. You can interact with FDA for your protocols and reports. During or after the submission, there's interactive request. There's either the technical screening or the AINN additional information request hold. But after that, what you get is a day 10 meeting. So if you get a hold letter or like even an NSE letter, you'll get a day 10 meeting, which is within the first 10 days, you'll set up a meeting to essentially clarify what we've already told you in the letter, if you have any questions on that. If that doesn't work for you, or let's say like you have new tests that had to be developed, something like that, that's what you're going to submit in an SIR, which is submission issue request. This is again part of queue submissions. The type of queue submission again comes to eStart. This is where you'll be like, this is my test protocol, would this be acceptable now? So that's a SIR. The next level is least burdensome plan. This is when you're still not happy and you're throwing in what is the least burdensome plan. This is when you're essentially asking the higher management to get involved, that you're not happy with this process or something like that, and they're going to review all of it. And then the final is the formal appeal. That's more like adversarial, like after explaining all of this, after giving all the justification, if you still think that the reviewer missed out or like did some mistake or something like that, that's when you can file a formal appeal. And these are like 3 to 5. Like, it's not a happy thing when that happens, but you have the right to do that. So coming to the application and the registration fees, as I mentioned, like first thing you want to check is whether you qualify for a small business determination. Earlier, there used to be different forms for the US manufacturers and the foreign agents. Now there is one form. There's no fees to submit this form, and it generally takes up to 60 days for the small business determination. This requires like your tax information and your revenue information and stuff like this.
Do we have to have a US presence for submission of this?
No. But you need a US agent after it's cleared for post-marketing compliance. You need a US agent, which is one person that FDA can reach out to if they have questions about your device or something like this.
But that is after the clearance.
After the clearance.
No, for small business determination. But the letter from local tax authority is like
Yeah.
That's another thing.
that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
People are dying.
Then so the small business determination essentially helps you with the application fee. So like for now, this year the 510K application fee is some like $24,000, $335. The small business determination it goes to like $6,000. That's a big difference. So worth giving it a shot. And then once you generate the user fee cover sheet, that's when you submit the pre-market submission. So it is after you've submitted the proof of payment, only then we start looking at the file. And then after the clearance or the approval of your submission, that's when you actually register your establishment and list your device. And for this, the fees changes. it's in the fiscal year. So like if you are planning to submit by next year, let's say end of August or starting of August, you might want to register now, because it might change. You know, so it's only for like one fiscal year this season. I hear it's changing quite a bit. So yeah, for now it's like $9,000 for this year, but next year it's going to be 11,000. So, and in this case, there is no small business determination, unless like you're active bankruptcy or something like this with like prior registration. Like you already had 1 year registration before, and this year you can't do the registration because you're going bankruptcy. Then they might pay it off.
And
but yeah,
this is the annual fee.
and yeah,
So every year 11,000.
And just
yeah.
this is when you say establishment, you're saying about the fact of premises or whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
So is there a process of checking whether it's up to the mark?
It's post compliance.
Okay.
There's some issue comes up, or there's some.
What do they look for? They look for ISO certifications. Do they look for any maps? They ask you for.
I mean, I don't know how to audit as much. Okay,
But that form,
yeah,
that form, register your establishment. That one.
yeah.
You have to submit a lot of details about your factory.
No, this is the location.
Okay.
Just the name, location, where it's based.
Sorry. What if somebody gets the clearance and fails to register? What happens to the clearance?
You can't sell the device.
Yeah.
In US, right?
Yeah, you can't sell it.
But then the clearance also expires?
Good question. I don't think so.
How long will it be valid?
I think it's perpetuity, but yeah. Registration is only to sell.
Yes. So to be frank, one of the strategies for Indian companies could be get a US FDA 510K and sell it everywhere else in the world by bragging about 510K, including India.
Yeah.
As far as I know, like, yeah, it doesn't really add that much value.
No.
They tend to put
Yeah. So for example, in Indian tenders, they ask for 510K. It gives us bragging rights in the Indian market and markets in Africa and Southeast Asia. So how long is this paper valid? That's the question. If we
Clearance is like perpetuity. There's no, unless you change something. But there is QMS requirements, which is like it's in CFR, so it is the law that you have to maintain QMS and all this stuff.
that we have.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
I think we are at the establishment only includes the manufacturer.
yes, I think your office can put it there.
What it's saying is right now it only talks to the address. But if they audit your facility, then they want to see yours. So that's how the manufacturing facility will also be. That will happen later.
The facility needs free US.
No.
Just audit.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think India has the second largest number of US FDA sites after the US. I think audience and surprise of these. But
That's more of
But you know that.
pharma, right? Because of pharma, that would.
Yeah, but even here it will happen. Right, of course, for pharma, but this is happening, right? There are audits happening, surprise audits. So once you're there and you're trying to sell, once you're registered there, you have to be ready to face auditing it.
Yeah.
And that is fair. And because Serum Institute is in Pune, they might just make a detour and visit one of us.
That's why then like auditors are pretty busy. Especially now, like in between like few months, the budget for them had reduced significantly. So there's not a lot of that happening. I think it's restarted now. But still like a lot of delays and all that. So yeah, I think they're not just like visiting unless like there is, some report or something like that they're following up on. So I think we are at time, but I can go quickly. I have like 5 slides.
Yeah, we can.
So I talked about the regulatory part of it, coming to the preclinical testing now. Which is essentially generating scientific evidence. And scientific evidence is not only bench test. It's a whole package. So which includes your design control and documentation, so all your design like input verification and all that stuff. There's the non-clinical bench testing, of course. But then depending on the risk analysis, if there's a risk that your device can be not used properly by the patient or by the clinician, then maybe you need a human factors in usability study also. Clinical performance is very, very rare. Only when bench testing and animal testing hasn't been able to support safety and efficacy for your device, only then we're going towards clinical performance testing. And again, patient experience, which is the patient's own interactions with the device and what their feedback and how easy it is to use and all that, that could be considered as well. The only time I think that has been considered for 510K is for expanding the indications of use. So other than that, for 510K, patient experience information doesn't come in as handy. And then of course, labeling requirements, depending on what your device is, a lot of the risk could be mitigated by just the labeling itself, that you're giving them instruction on how to use it properly. And that's how you're mitigating the risk. So that's part of your scientific evidence of your submission. So then before you're initiating the preclinical testing, of course, you want to know your product's device description, the intended use, target population, duration of use, classification, all of that we already talked about. But then the next thing you really want to know about is the testing requirements, the specifications, the acceptance criteria, etc. And how do you go about it? Is first check for the horizontal and the vertical FDA guidances. By horizontal, what you mean is they essentially apply to almost all devices, like biocompatibility, electrical safety, electromagnetic compatibility, right? All of that applies generally to all of it. But vertical guidance is specific to a device. So an orthopedic implant or maybe a polypropylene mesh, they have their own guidance document. Right? So you need to know both the general guidance documents for each category of testing, as well as the specific to your own device. And also the special controls and consensus standards that might be there. So for this, what you want to generally do is check FDA databases for predicates and requirements. So FDA databases generally has a 510K database, there's a PMA database. In that, you'll see what the previous cleared devices are. And then you can look at the 510K summary. That will generally also have what was the bench testing that they use, to support performance and all this. Will have some information on it.
That is only summary is accessible, right?
Yeah.
Not the full submission.
You can access the full, not entire submission, but there's something called FOIA, which is Freedom of Information Act. These are also free to file. And if you're in the early stage, you should be filing, those also FOIA. And that's for asking for some particular submissions, the submission itself. They'll redact the confidential information, but they'll give you even the reviewer memo of, how we reviewed it, what was looked at, what the issues came, whatever it is, will all come in. So filing for FOIA request, always, a good idea. And also using the pre-subs as much as you can. And then once you know your testing requirements, specifications, and all of this, maybe that's when you design, develop a design and risk management plan. So your PQMS stuff. You have your quality systems, protocols like QA, QC, testing protocols, the failure analysis, all that, the formative and summative usability testing, which is if your device is dependent on how the user will use it, if it's really, most of it is based on that, you want to have there's two stages of the formative usability testing, which is a few people to see what mistakes they make with that device, and then the actual summative testing towards the end with a larger group to show that they use it properly as you intended it. And then same again, software validation, cybersecurity, supplier qualification is a big one. We come across this so many times that they haven't done a good supplier qualification. So now supplier has changed. So now their chemical composition has changed. So now it means biocompatibility entirely has to be repeated. So now, it's a new submission again. So just missing out on that small detail of supplier qualification could cost you a lot more towards the end. Same for labeling requirements and packaging. Depending on your device, there could be very specific labeling and packaging requirements and this performance criteria. So again, before initiating any preclinical testing, highly recommend please submit a pre-submission to FDA, and that's where you discuss your test protocols. You can even submit your test reports. They won't look at the data and they won't comment on the data. But like I said, depends on the reviewer.
For test reports, what we've been hearing is that US FDA would not accept test results from an Indian lab. Is that still so?
No, No, that's I actually will come to that. I have a point about this. The problem has been with data integrity, but there is no such thing as Indian lab or as long as it's done according to the requirements, the QMS requirements and the GLP and all that stuff. It's not whether it's Indian lab or not.
Yeah. Do we need clinical bridging data for that? Or applying for 510?
For clinical
Bridging data.
Yeah, between clinical performance.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, like only if you're animal testing, let's say if you had to do animal testing or like first bench testing, if they cannot address the safety and effectiveness completely, maybe in that case, only in that case. But clinical for 510K is very rare. Won't see that. There might be a post compliance, like post approval compliance, like a 522G study, right? Like for IUDs and all that had issues, there were a lot of those that were done. So you'll have those studies that are happening later on, but initially clinical, unless no other testing couldn't address the safety and effectiveness, maybe, but very rare. Yeah. All right. So this is generally the profile for your product development, right? Which is you have the device performance requirements, then ideally you're going to the candidate material and designs, doing the material testing, the device prototype verification, and then the final finished device. In reality, it's never that simple. There's a lot of iterations. You want to be able to plan for iterations. A simple thing we keep seeing is for materials. People generally tend to go that we have this FDA approved material that we have selected, and therefore that we think that now the testing is going to be less, or it's biocompatible already because it's FDA approved material. First thing, there's no such thing as FDA approved materials. FDA is not approving materials, right? We're approving the device because that involves the manufacturing process, the handling, the sterilization. The way you do all of that can also affect the biocompatibility. So it's not just the material itself. So when you're selecting the material, like it's good to select a material that has some clinical history to it, because then you're not like reinventing the wheel and trying to justify an entirely novel formulation. But at the same time, when you're selecting the material, like some material will have such a long clinical history, they'll have their own requirements to it. Ultra high polyethylene being one, right? For oxidation, there's so much issues with like long-term oxidation for ultra high polyethylene that even though if it's been used before, there's going to be a lot more testing that you're going to need to do at the resin stage, at the device stage for ultra high polyethylene. So when you're selecting the material, and the device prototype and all, it is going to be an iterative process that you need to account for and give time for. All right. Now coming to, I think, a couple of final slides. The non-clinical testing itself. So there is the performance test, the functional test. So these are like mechanical corrosion degradation kind of test. This usually comes in when you're doing the product development itself, like your QA/QC, you're already developing, like seeing if your prototype actually works the way you intended it to work. So a lot of these do come there. But again, when you have a final finished device, all of this testing will have to be done on the final finished device again. It has to be the one that is already sterilized and all that as a representative device. Then there's also the biocompatibility testing. It itself is a very, very big and vast subject. Here, all you need to know is there's a good guidance for biocompatibility. And what you need to know is what is your tissue contact type and the tissue contact duration. Because that's going to define what all testing you need. Like there's basic like 5 tests that go for like most devices. But for some devices that are like implants or longer term, there'll be a lot more testing that comes in. And like carcinogenicity, genotoxicity sometimes cannot be addressed for animals. In those cases, you could use chemical characterization, which is the idea is as long as we know the entire chemical composition of the device and what it's leaching out, then maybe we can do a toxicological risk assessment on what has come out to see whether it's going to be toxic in the long run or not. But biocompatibility, chemical characterization, TRA, this is where most deficiencies are, this is where most NSCs are, and this is where most problems are. Right? That's the most deficiencies I've written in my life so far. So sterilization, reprocessing, cleaning, again, there's guidance for it. Sterilization, like basic thing people will miss is like guidance, say there's different categories of sterilization. Let's say ethylene oxide and all classifies as category A. For that, all you need to do is give a summary. You don't need to give a full report, right? Because the guidance says but we still see people giving like, again and again, the full report. So my first thing I do in the first 10 days is ask for the summary. So you want to be careful of, or like, just be aware of what testing exists and what are the requirements for that. Shelf life, cybersecurity, electrical safety, EMC, these can take a lot of time. So shelf life, let's say you have 5-year shelf life, that's going to take like 3-4 months, even when you're doing accelerated aging. So it's going to take time. You're going to have to wait it out. And at the same time, even though you're giving accelerated aging, doing it at higher temperature, you're still going to need real-time aging as validation. So you're going to have to do that study for 5 years and then keep that data in your TMS if it's needed. So again, you have to plan ahead for this. Same electrical safety, EMC, there's a few test labs, not a lot of test labs that actually do this. So it's hard to find these test labs, So there's a waiting for that, and they do take time and they're expensive. Like as well as I've seen, like it's like almost $50,000, that range can get pretty expensive for EMC and all, depending on your device, of course. But common question always is about content and format. There's a nice guidance for this that came out in 2019, which provides the content and the format requirements, and you can just follow that. It's pretty simple. What you definitely always need is the test report summary, which is what is the test performed, the device description or sample size, the test method, acceptance criteria, the results or deviation from results, and the actual results. And then also the discussion and conclusion section, how this is actually supporting your substantial equivalence. So the test reports are actually pretty well structured, generally always the same. And then complete test reports are rarely required. It depends on what the test is, but sometimes it may be required. And you can also submit test protocols separately. Right, so last one, common issues. Like I mentioned, is the device legally marketed or not? Have they considered all technological characteristics? Like that is one way people do leave out stuff that they think we've missed, but can't see the device. Then the test article selection, this is a big one. Generally, what we're asking for is it should be a worst case representative for that particular test. So for biocompatibility, it's probably going to be the biggest device you have. But for mechanical testing or something, it's probably going to be the smallest device you have. If you have a lot of variations, then there's the diamond testing, which is you need one sample from each corner of your specification. So let's say you have length and breadth. Then you're going to need the smallest one, smallest length, smallest breadth, the largest length, largest breadth, and the 4 corners like that, and maybe in the middle one. So it depends. But this is again one of the most common deficiencies I've sent also, which is justify your test article selection. Why did you test this particular configuration of your device, and why that represents the worst case for your device? The unclear and incomplete labeling, again, very common to have that. And again, missing or inadequate bench performance testing. So all preclinical testing is supposed to be representative of the clinical and the anatomical use. So it has to be representative of that. So like I've seen people have acceptance criteria of 20 Newton for tensile strength. Where that comes from, no one knows. But that's why when you're establishing acceptance criteria, it has to be specific. And the final thing, the data integrity issue that you mentioned. So the actual statement where India and China were mentioned was this particular one, which is that there's been an increase in submissions containing unreliable data generated by third-party test labs, including from numerous facilities based in China and India. So
this is there in a guidance note from university.
Yeah.
Past things.
Yes. Yeah. Came out, so it's recurring. It happens a lot, unfortunately. And it's not like it's only like the small labs or something. It's actually like I did speak to a few big labs here. All of them.
What is
Or
their-
most of them.
But just to be specific, like what is their definition of reliable data? Like they look for some things which make it reliable. Like
They look for things which make it unreliable. So the language is that when you get that letter, it will be that this is improbable. That the data you have generated, it's not impossible because things can happen, but it's improbable in like scientific literature that this has ever happened, and somehow you have managed to do it. So they don't tell you how they figure it out, which is why I also won't get into it. And the reason is because once they tell you, you know how to manipulate it better. You know, so yeah, but it is quite prevalent, and it happens a lot, and there is no good check for it as of yet. Like I have seen a lot of those data integrity issues, so I know what I'm looking for now. But people who haven't been able to do that or work from the inside on this subject, right? So FDA is not telling you exactly what happened or how they figured it out. And they're not even going to tell which test it was or something like this. So it's up to you to figure it out. And then a lot of times people go back to the drawing board and try to do all the testing again. Whereas most likely it was like, one particular test or something like that. So yeah, it's and in the same letter you'll see that the language is that the onus is on the device manufacturers to do a quality check of their report. Again, when they're saying like it's improbable, like from a scientist perspective, when you're looking at it, you should look at it and be like, that just cannot happen. How did that happen? So yeah, so but still the onus is on you, even if you're getting the best lab out there, for you to review it and make sure that there was no data integrity.
Would it help if we use one of the international labs like UL or TUV Rhineland?
Yeah, so there is, I don't know specific ones, but so there's ASCA accreditation. So there is some accreditation that for biocompatibility that comes in. You can go to those labs. Yeah, in those cases, because then we are not reviewing the actual full report itself. We're just reviewing the
ASCA is a US FDA accreditation, right? For the labs.
Yeah. So yeah, those ones you can go to, and those are the really expensive ones.
But still, the ones in India would be less expensive compared to the ones.
Yeah, so from what I understood so far, it's like that. Like it's both sides. Because companies want, like, say, the test is $1,000, companies want it for 500. And now the test lab that's going to somehow make it happen in 500, it's probably not going to do the test, just give you the numbers. So it's the companies want it cheaper too, and the test lab also wants to get it done. They want the business, they don't want to do the work also, I guess. So it's from both sides in some ways. Yeah.
Good, I think, yeah. Thank you. I think first let's just give him a round of applause. I think that is a good overview, Tanmay. Thank you very much. And it allows us to think about some of these things. Let us unshare these.
Yes.
See the screen, see the questions. Since we didn't have a chance to look at the chat, so
Yes.
we didn't have a chance to, maybe you can take it up, Akash, go through it. In the meantime, if there are any specific questions, we can take a few up right now, not try to do all today, but whatever we can. But we give priority to the online folks first. Any questions you want to take up immediately? Akash,
Yes.
name the person and state the question.
So there is a question from Zahir Jaffer from Aerodel. He is asking for a smart device like smart inhalers. Would it be possible to enter the market as a wellness product and based on traction, approach the medical device regulated pathway?
Yeah, that depends entirely on how you define intended use and the indications of use. Yeah.
If you want to ask, Zahir, are you online? Can you allow him to ask?
Yes.
So, just remove that cross. Huh? Let's go down.
No,
It's not there. Okay. Anybody else here? It may be open the. Yeah, questions. Let's start at the top. It's Zahir already. So it's still there. See this one, it's still there. Okay, let's go to some other section. Another question, if intended use substantially equivalent with the premarket difference by this technological difference.
Yes, this question is answered.
Yes.
Devin has a question. If I'm in orthopedics and procuring my device for outsourcing, but I want to put my company name on it, in this case, do I need a loan license? And yellow AA and not a yellow NE. And what if I'm not taking it in the Indian market as my own? Do I need the part number from the original producer, or I can allocate my own part.
So I think essentially it's talking about white labeling.
Yeah.
It depends on who submitted the submission.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you could be the distributor for them, but if you're putting your own labeling on it, most likely then it's probably going to be your own device or your own submission, and it's going to be reviewed as such individually, regardless of like if you have the previous submission details that company has done, you can use it as a predicate. Most likely you'll be able to use a lot of those reports if they're sharing that. But yeah, if you're changing the labeling, I think most likely be under your name, because then in the registration and listing, you're going to have to register your company and the device. If you just wanted to sell it, you could just be the distributor, I guess.
Yeah, so if you're going to get just a distributor, then you can use the registration of the producer. But if you're trying to say that you are the producer and selling it, then it has to be your registration. And in which case you have to provide all the data that is needed. Right?
Yes.
Fine. Apurva Gaikwad says, could you please clarify the process of submitting a submission issue request SIR specifically? I'd like to understand the required steps involved. The typical timelines should account for starting from date of receiving request letter and this.
So SIR is when essentially you get a hold letter, and let's say they've asked you to do some new tests or some tests differently. You want to specify the details about it. It's essentially clarification, but like more formal. So you're asking like, this is my new test protocol. Would this be acceptable? Or this is my new acceptance criteria. Would this be acceptable? That's when you're submitting a submission issue request. You have to discuss the details of what was deficient about your file that you're going to address. In terms of timeline, like for hold, there is 180 days. So generally, you can submit SIR anytime. As soon as you get the letter. But if you want to maintain that initial submission, you want to be able to give the revised submission or the amended submission within 180 days. So any time between that, you can do the SIR. I'm not sure how long. I think it's also 60 to 75 days because it is part of a new submission. Generally get a response within 60 to 75 days. But you should probably try and get a lot of clearance and or clarification in the date and call. Don't wait for the SIR.
One of Sai's questions on whether you suggest the test third-party lab in the United States, every lab will be accepted. Like your answer really yes. There's no ethical practices, the data or the data issues. And if you test data from marketing partner, acceptable and would always need to come from an independent third-party lab. So for example, suppose he has an Indian pharmaceutical company as a partner and they have generated some data. Is that lab data good enough for you to go to third party?
No. There's no requirement for third-party lab. You could generate your own data as long as you have the GLP and all the QMS requirements for the lab. And at the same time, the testing, you can use the testing from the pharmaceutical company, but as long as it's done by the required standard. Right? For like biocompatibility, I'm sure like for drug and device is going to be very different. Analytical testing also, like for medical devices, there's a particular standard, ISO 10993 part 18. That's what we expect the analytical testing to be done so as long as they've done it the same way with the same standard, we don't really care where it's coming from. That's for you to manage and deal with it.
I just come down to this question was we have nanobody based N95 mask which has gone through a NEO FDA 510K required 510K because of nanobody 510K changes biocompatibility that is toxicity sensitivity skin indication. Done all of the tests needed as per FDA. Should we do the same test in US and then set that and also do clinical study since it's required by it's put together like a device substance certification. So this is basically an N95 mask and we should separate out the NEOS and the 510K. So for FDA 510K, I suppose
only for surgical. So actually I did a project on N95 mask myself.
Yeah.
Only the surgical N95 masks or respirators are the ones that are regulated by FDA. Otherwise, going through NIOSH. So only if it's based or used in a surgical environment, then you are likely going to the FDA 510K route.
And I think I know a little bit more about this because N95 is a US rating.
Yeah.
Okay, so for that you will need to probably go to one of those Nelson labs to get that rating.
I thought it was based on like particle testing.
Yeah, but the N95 is actually terminology for the US. Okay, you can do an equivalent of N95 in India. But N95 is actually a US thing.
I mean, in the case, like they're not offering those tests here. Yeah, but there's no requirement that the test have to
There
be.
are people here who do the testing.
Yeah.
For equivalent of N95, but N95 happens to be a certification of NEOS.
Right.
Okay, that's not on this side, so he has to do that. Right? Does US FDA approve medical devices require Indian regulatory approach beyond, of course, yes, right? And the CS for that. And I think that's about it. Please fill up this form that our team has put up. Actually, let me put it up again, the feedback form for people who can fill it up.
Just two questions.
Is FOIR paid service?
That's FOIA, that's FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And no, it's free. Depending, I mean, if it's, unless you're asking for like a huge number of files, which would take them a lot of resources and time, then they might charge it. But for like a normal 510K, if you ask for previous submissions and their records, most likely it's going to be free because it's pretty straightforward for them to do it.
There's also this coming back the same question on SIR. Apurva Gaikwad asks, could you please clarify whether formal letters required when submitting requests in SIR? If so, what information should be included in the letter?
So the SIR is a part of the new submission. So you're using the E-star template again, right? In that you can add a cover letter. I don't think it might be a requirement, but you can just say that we received this feedback and this is how we're planning to address it. So I think that's the cover letter, but there's no like specific requirement or format for a cover letter for SIR.
I think with that, we close this session.
Yes, before that we just have to take a photo. So I would request every other online participant to turn on their video. And before leaving the meeting, please submit your feedback. I request you also to submit the feedback on the QR code given there.
Yeah. Okay, can I request the others to can you put the view please?
Yes.
For the gallery view. Can I request others to please put have you enabled it? You may not be able to switch it on.
Yes, we have enabled.
Please switch on the videos. Are you sure? I think he can't start. See, you have to allow video access. So I should get it's allowed. Maybe can you please allow me?
Yes, I have requested Aishwarya. Aishwarya, did you allow?
Now it's coming on. Request everybody to switch on the video, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Any more? Any more people want to show up? Yeah, we can switch on the. Just give us a minute, please. Just finish the picture and then speak. Any more? Switch it on. One can. Okay, let's do it. Well, thank you everybody for joining in and connect with our team if you have any questions and we'll see how to help you out that as well. Right? So what happens already?
I think the wire.
Yeah.
Yes, it's working.
And yeah, I think Krishna, thank you very much. I think we can now just take the last question from Krishnadas and you. Okay, Krishnadas, sorry.
Hi, sir. Good evening, Krishnadas here. Yeah, this comes under MSH, which is surgical respirator used in hospital environment in US. So since it is nanomaterial based, it has to go through biocompatibility like in vitro cytotoxicity, then skin sensitization, skin irritation. That 3 tests we have done in India, which is all non cytotoxicity. So even though it's a nanomaterial, so non cytotoxicity. So should we do it in US and Nelson Labs, which is approved by US FDA? And same clinical study in US because F510K and NIOSH US FDA has a MOU, right, for surgical respirators.
Right. So yeah, I don't think, first of all, there's no US FDA approved labs, and there's no requirement that you do it in the US. As long as your reports are done according to the proper standards and the proper protocols, as well as you do a good quality check on them, I think it's okay. You can use the same report that you had from the Indian labs.
No, we have done that as per US FDA norms only, ISO 109935. So which is done in an institute in India, which is already approved by US WHO and other organizations. So US when we contacted them, they suggest us to do it in Nelson Labs, which is since it is approved by US FDA, and some issue is there now these days with China and Indian labs. They are not approving the report from China and Indian labs.
As Tanmay mentioned, there are data integrity issues, but it is not true that they are not accepting data from Indian and Chinese labs. They are accepting, but there are many they will reject because they think there are data integrity. And we know ourselves that there are labs from whom they have accepted data from Indian labs. Okay, we know, right? So it's not that it is not accepted. It is there is some data which is accepted and some data which they find faulty. Okay, so they will not accept it if the quality is not up to the mark. That's it, as simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can, and as you were saying, there's no such thing as sort of US FDA approved labs. There's something called an ASCA accreditation. If they have it, great. So you have to figure that out in terms of who's that. But the cost, of course, increases sometimes. Yeah.
You might be,
Sorry, I think we go here.
Thank you. Thank you.
might be subject to tariffs.
That seems to be, I don't know what. The last question from you and then we close. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Keep
No,
everybody.
it's a novel device, so instead of pushing through de novo, we are trying for a substantial equivalent novel device. We don't have any competition in US also.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think we'll discuss that separately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
So is there a limitation to how many substantial equivalents you can have in different dedicated devices to be able to categorize or classify a device?
So I think we discussed that, right? Like, there's no limit to how many, but when you're going beyond 2, then you're stretching it already. Because now you're trying to just take one part from here, one part from there, and trying to say that I'm similar in this, similar in that. Then that doesn't work always.
So can the substantial equivalence come from the functionality, but the intended use is different?
No.
Yes.
Substantial equivalence, the first thing is intended use. Like the flow chart, when you look at that, the first one of the previous question is intended use. If the answer is no, you're already out of that process. It has to be yes, and then technology can be a little bit different, but not the intended use.
Okay, I think let's stop here. Thank you very much. Thanks again.